many victims, including alleged victim 1, 2, 3, 4. Does that mean we're going to hear other people who are not enumerated as one of the alleged victims, but are just other victims of the case? Because I don't.
It could be. They could bring people who are other victims in the case, especially the way the case is spread, the way the case is being tried. Now, they would have had to tell the defense by now who those potential witnesses are, and I assume, I don't know if we would have heard about it. Usually you would have heard about it. You would see it on the docket, but I don't know.
So talking about this alleged criminal enterprise and how, based on the opening statement from
yesterday, we're on day 2 of the Diddy trial. Let's watch along.
Who were helping him commit the crimes, but also covering them up. Just now, an update from court. Prosecutor asked Cassie Ventura, how would he keep tabs on you? To which she apparently responds, he didn't live far apart. Oh, we didn't live far apart. He'd send security to come find me or a trusted assistant. Like who? David James, Christina Coram, who we all know has been a central figure in this case. Maybe not the criminal case, but she's come up in lawsuits before. The prosecutor asks her, was your relationship exclusive? Ventura replies, no. If she's naming names like David James or Christina Coram, do they have to testify, you think?
I don't think they have to testify, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I would think this is all planned out, that she's going to indicate some people and then the prosecution is going to bring them in later in the trial to verify, right? One thing you really want to do with a witness like this, the defense is going to say that she's embellishing. They might say she's lying, but that's going to be a little hard to do with that video, right? They can't just say she's a liar. But they're going to say she's exaggerating, she's embellishing, they're painting it a certain way because of the case. So you have to bring in these corroborating witnesses and whatever other corroborating evidence you have to verify what it is she's saying. So it would be very useful, for example, if she says, yes, David James came around to check on me on behalf of Mr. Combs, and then David James takes the stand and says, yes, I did that.
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
Well, and yesterday they talked about the defense, her lawsuit in 2023, her attorney being in the courtroom, that she has an incentive, a monetary incentive to fabricate this situation. Her testimony that's happening in real time. We're trying to update you as quickly as possible about what she says in that courtroom. No cameras in the courtroom. No audio in the courtroom. So this is the best we can do to bring you her testimony in real time. Question from Daniela, 3984, talking about the video. What version of the hotel video was played in the courtroom? Was it the sped up version? Now, I believe it was portions of the surveillance video, not the CNN video, and cell phone video that was taken by the security guard who testified, Israel Flores. He had apparently taken a cell phone video of the surveillance footage to show his wife, but that became a big pretrial issue about what the jury was going to see.
Yeah. And by the way, that story was a little odd. I took a video of it to show my wife. For what purpose? I mean, that was a little strange.
Well, you're not going to believe this happened, even though he didn't report it to the police.
I think it's going to be difficult. I think the defense would like you to believe that video has been doctored somehow, but I think they're going to have trouble sustaining that.
Hey, would you like a civil law question?
Yes, please.
Yes, this is our litigator here. Question from Teodora Bodurova. Can Cassie sue Diddy again if Diddy's found guilty as charged?
So, Cassie, if you remember, sued Diddy. And that was the first thing we really heard about this. That was before the video. There was this blockbuster lawsuit in November of 2023 that really put these allegations out there. And she was very detailed. In fact, the front page of her lawsuit had a trigger warning on it. It was so detailed. That case was settled the next day. And I would have to think that the settlement included an agreement that she wouldn't sue him again for anything. Usually, if you're going to settle like that and pay the kind of money she would have gotten paid for settling that lawsuit, you get what is known as a general release. And a general release means you don't sue me for anything that happened. Now, here's one caveat. Up to the date of this agreement. Up to the date of this agreement. So then if you the next day punch me in the face, I have a new lawsuit against you.
Yeah.
Right? But at least up to the agreement, she can't go back now and say, I want more money.
Well, for the same conduct, right? I mean, if he
Right.
comes out and he did something to her, or allegedly did something to her after the agreement was signed.
Yeah. Presumably they
right.
got it. And it also, like, you have to make sure the release covers all of his companies, all of these
Right.
other individuals who were involved. It has to be a general release of everybody. You don't want to leave any wiggle room to have a lawsuit.
We have a follow-up question to this from Fads. So why did he settle if he was innocent?
Well, I mean, people settle all the time when they think they're not liable. People, like, with the thing that really surprised me when that case was filed is that the case was filed. Typically, in a case like that, you draft the complaint and you send it to the defendant and you say, "Dear sir, please pay me a boatload of money or I'm going to file this publicly in court." And if there's any merit to it, or if just for publicity reasons, the defendant decides to negotiate and pay, and it never goes to court. So it fascinated me at the time that she actually filed that publicly and he settled it the next day. That unfortunately was pretty telling, that he didn't put up any fight on the lawsuit. He didn't even want to litigate it. He didn't even want to go to discovery. He wanted to settle it immediately.
And if he would have settled it before she filed it, I think we would have been in a very different position than we are today.
Oh, I totally agree, because that lawsuit, I think, is what sets this ship sailing.
I agree. Okay, update from court. Prosecutor asks Cassandra Ventura, "Did you see other men?" Cassandra Ventura responds, "Yes." Prosecutor asks, "Did Sean see other women?" Ventura responds, "Yes. He said, 'I am Puff Daddy. I was insanely jealous.' Did you move to LA with him?" "Yes. He wanted to be close to his kids who were there." Goes to a theme from yesterday where the defense owned up and said, yeah, he's jealous, he's angry, he's violent. He engaged in domestic violence. That 2016 video is indefensible. When you hear her testify like that, does it help the defense? Does it help the prosecution? Because the defense got in front of it. They didn't say he's a saint.
Well, it helps the prosecution, but the defense did the correct thing in opening statement, and they had to do it. They didn't have any choice. I mean, the defense couldn't walk into this trial and say he's the victim of a conspiracy to invent evidence against him. That was never going to work. The thing's on video, and there's lots of other evidence. So they were going to have to say he is not a delightful guy. You people on the jury probably aren't going to like things that he did. He did engage in things we consider domestic violence, but this is a racketeering case. And I liked that about the opening statement. They made that very clear. You're going to have to judge the crimes alleged here, not whether you like him or dislike him.
And look, I think the defense spent a large portion yesterday dismantling all of those, as you mentioned, underlying crimes as part of racketeering. It's not kidnapping, right? Because the person he allegedly kidnapped had worked for him 10 years, still wanted to work for him. It's not involved in the arson, forced labor. He worked hard. His employees worked hard. Drug trafficking, personal drug use. So they're saying the prosecution can't meet the elements of the crimes that are charged against Sean Combs. Okay, question from Content Channel. Will the transcripts be available? Will the transcripts be available to the public? Yes. In fact, we are using them in a lot of the content that we're creating for you. I did it in a sidebar earlier today that's coming out. Sierra Gillespie, who has the Scandal channel, has been using them as well. And by the way, if you go on our Law and Crime YouTube, we're also experimenting a little bit with this AI. We're creating recreations of the courtroom, what it's going to look like since there's no cameras. We're using the transcripts verbatim to tell the story, to kind of recreate what the trial may be looking like. We're experimenting a little bit there, so come check out Law and Crime's YouTube channel on that. Question from JW, not me. JW, who's Kim Porter? So Kim Porter was Diddy's ex, right? I have done a lot of sidebars when it came to Kim Porter, because this is the mother of several of his children. She died from pneumonia several years back. Came up yesterday in testimony. They came up yesterday in opening statements because the defense's theory is that these women were jealous of him, right? They're coming after him for jealous. So Cassandra Ventura, when she found out allegedly that Combs said, "My one true love is Kim Porter," she became angry, jealous, saw that the relationship wasn't going anywhere. But I've done a lot of sidebars on Kim Porter because there are those on the online community and some in the public who believe that her death was not just a tragic result of natural consequences, but Sean Combs may have had something to do with it. I think those theories have been debunked, but she is coming up in this trial.
Yeah, I'm sure she is. And listen, how old was she when she died?
That's a good question. I'll tell you right now. Kim Porter, let me say
40 something?
47.
Okay. 47-year-old with a lot of financial means dies of pneumonia. I understand why there are people online questioning that.
Yeah.
I understand. I don't know if there's anything to it, but I understand why it would raise an eyebrow.
There's a lot of weird stuff, but based on the medical examiner, based on what we've seen, the circumstances, and I've done episodes of Sidebar on this. To me, it doesn't seem like there was anything more there. I'm sure people will disagree. But just by the way, talking about it, we are planning to dedicate so many shows and content to the Diddy trial. So definitely keep checking out Long Crimes YouTube channel. We will constantly put out videos. By the way, a little bit later on, we're going to bring on Elizabeth Milner, who's right now in the courthouse watching Cassandra Ventura testify. She's going to come on here, tell us what she saw. So stay with us here on this live program. We have a question from Ariana San 1. Is it favorable to start her testimony so early in the case? How could this influence the foundation of the remaining counts that he's charged with?
I think it's a perfectly good strategy. And by the way, I took your point earlier, right? She's pregnant, so you have to deal with that. You can't get into a situation where she's not available. Also, I wonder if with these victims' witnesses, the prosecution's thinking is, we want to get this testimony on the record as soon as possible. We don't want to risk anything happening with these key witnesses of ours. We want to get them in the courtroom and get it done and get it in front of the jury as soon as we can. Now, in terms of the flow of a trial, you want to start strong, you want to end strong, you want to ebb and flow, you want to worry about how you end at the end of a Friday going into a weekend. You want to sort of pay attention to the pace of the trial and the story you're telling. But you also have to deal with availability of witnesses. Not every witness is available every day. You have to deal with that and put this complicated puzzle together of what witnesses are you calling in what order. But I do think they really wanted to start this trial with something really significant, and this made sense.
Got a question from Helena Ignacia Gallego. Is Cassie allowed to testify on racketeering evidence that she witnessed, or only her personal experience with Diddy?
Well, she's allowed to testify if she witnessed racketeering evidence and has personal knowledge of it and is qualified to testify about it, she can testify.
I think she already has,
Yeah,
talking about the
like
assistants and the people who might have helped him. But how do they prove an agreement, right? It's not just racketeering conspiracy. There has to be an agreement to further criminal activity, to further racketeering activity. What's the agreement? How do they prove that?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because the agreement isn't we're going to abuse a lot of women. Let's go use this enterprise and go do that. That no one has an agreement like that. So that's part of the problem of a racketeering count at all. It's so technical in the requirements of proof. It's really hard to sustain.
Got an update from court. Cassie Ventura's testimony happening in real time. Prosecutor asks, where did you live in LA? Ventura responds, 875 Comstock Avenue. This is Wilshire Corridor condos. How tall was the building? No more than 17 floors. Where did Sean live? 200 South Mapleton. Sean would use a golf cart to get back and forth. I know where this is going. This is going to the allegation that she was present, and I might be wrong, that she was present when Sean Combs dangled a woman off the balcony. You remember that allegation? I think that's where that's going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. And that's an important kind of allegation in this case, because again, the threats, the reason all of these people say they lived in fear.
All right, so you just moved to a new state. Your new monthly total is $180. I'm gonna lower my rate really fast. Watch this. Hi, I use this app called Jerry, and I actually found a bunch of great.
Like they were in agreement.
Question from, where is this? I thought we had a question. Yeah, we got a question up here. And I got another civil law question for you.
Excellent.
From Danny. Question: what happens to all the Diddy civil suits if he's found not guilty?
Well, it has no effect on the continuance of the civil suits. And in some way, it's actually helpful to the civil suits because the burden of proof, as we've said here many times, is different in a civil suit. You only have to prove more likely than not instead of beyond a reasonable doubt. So the jury could come back and find him acquitted on all counts because they didn't find proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That doesn't shield him from any civil litigation whatsoever. It might embolden him to fight, but the good news for those civil litigants is now he's out of prison. He's continuing to make money, presumably, and be a defendant that you could sue and collect from. That might be useful.
Yeah, and look, OJ, right?
Right.
OJ.
Well, that's the blueprint. That is exactly the blueprint. That is a criminal trial where they mucked up the prosecution and couldn't get a conviction, and then the family came in and got a civil judgment against him.
We have a question from, I'm not going to say the name because I don't think it's appropriate, but it's fine. I'm just going to spell it out for you. ASSY Mama. Okay. Will, this is a family show. Will Diddy testify?
Absolutely no way.
Really? You don't
No
think so?
way.
I don't think he is either. But
No way. I mean, in a million years, you're going to put him on the stand and let them show him that video and take him through it and cross-examine him. The odds of him doing that are very small.
He shouldn't. And it's very different than when he testified years ago in the nightclub shooting case. The circumstances incredibly different than they are here. And I think he probably has a lot more to lose here. By the way, but you think about his judgment. No, I don't know what told him it was a good idea to make an Instagram video admitting that it was him in the 2016 hotel video. You wonder about the admissions he made there. You wonder about what admissions he'd make on the stand.
So a defendant like Diddy is fighting two battles. He has this battle inside the courtroom where he doesn't want to be convicted of crimes, but he's still a public figure. He's still got to run his business. He's fighting a public relations battle. And I think at that moment, he thought, I have to say something about this publicly for the point of my business. And sometimes those two things conflict. What you would do for your business is not necessarily what you would do as a defendant.
We got a question. No, we have an update from court. A few things, actually. So first, we have a poll that I think is very interesting. Has this trial changed your view of Sean Diddy Combs? 54% say yes, 46% say no. Interesting what people came into this trial thinking, in the sense maybe their opinion was changed over the last year and a half about Sean Combs, so it's hard to know. Update from court. Prosecutor asks Cassie Ventura, who paid your rent in LA? Ventura responds, Sean, except when I had the house in Studio City. Prosecutor says, why'd you pay then? Ventura responds, I could afford it then, and I wanted to have some control. It was accepted. By whom? Sean. I think this is critical because this goes to the idea of the commercial sex acts, right? Don't you have to say there was something of value that was given or obtained in exchange for sex, in exchange for the relationship, or it goes to control he might have had over her? I think money is important here.
Yeah, I think money is important too. And the notion that was one of the ways he controlled her and other people is an important part of the trial.
This is a question from Josh Cutemup. How is it not a bigger deal that one of the witnesses is missing? Again, presuming alleged victim number 3.
I think it's a pretty big deal.
Yep.
The question is, at the end of this trial, has that person testified? And if the answer is no, now the jury doesn't ever have to know anything about it. I mean, the jury doesn't have to know that there was a planned third witness and they didn't show up. And therefore, the jury doesn't have to make any conclusions about that one way or another. You could make all sorts of different conclusions from that fact.
We got a few updates from court about the testimony of Cassandra Ventura. Prosecutor asks, how many songs did you write while with Sean Combs? Ventura says hundreds, that most were never released. Some got leaked on the internet, some on mixtapes. How many albums on your deal were not released? 9. Did you get paid for them? No. Then talking about the freak-offs, said the freak-offs became a job. There was no time to do anything else but do them, then try to recover from them. How much time in your week would freak-offs take? The longest was 4 days, significant periods of time. And by the way, this echoes what was said in the very first indictment against Sean Combs, when, in freak-offs, and what she said in her civil complaint, these prolonged sexual episodes. These are different than other kind of sex acts, and that's important, I think, for this kind of case.
Oh yeah, very important. The duration of those, the fact that drugs were so involved in them, the number of people involved, where they got the people from, all of that is very important. Nine albums. That's a lot of albums. That's an interesting fact, right? She's in this relationship. She's not just being abused. She's trying to start an entertainment career, and sounds like she was working pretty hard at it.
So we have a question from Madison Thomas. I have a question for Law and Crime. Did Cassie testify that Diddy injured her? Yes, that was, if you're just joining us now, first of all, we are reporting in real time her testimony on the stand. There are no cameras, there's no audio equipment. So we're trying our best to relay to you in real time what she's testifying to. But she started off her testifying by saying there were violent arguments that would result in physical abuse. There'd be dragging. She talked about being stomped in the head if she was down. That physical abuse or alleged physical abuse is a key component of this case, particularly sex trafficking, fraud, force, or coercion that was used to induce somebody to have these sex acts. This is a question from Angelina. Is Diddy placed with other inmates? If no, why not? I think there is an element of isolation in a way, although he is around other people.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics of his incarceration. I would suspect everybody's trying to keep him safe.
Well, I know that he's in the same MDC as Mangione. It's kind of become a little bit of a circus what's going on there. Okay, so we're getting update that it looks like court went to lunch. So we're going to be getting Elizabeth Milner on as soon as possible, who is in that courtroom, fascinated to know what she observed of Cassandra Ventura's testimony, and also how the jury might be responding to her testimony, which, by the way, can you ever glean anything from how the jury is responding to testimony?
Yes, you try. I mean, sometimes when I'm on trial, I have a person in the courtroom with me whose sole job is to watch the jury, because I'm very interested in the reactions of jurors. But jurors try not to express emotion. They try to stay straight-faced. They're not there reacting the same way you and I would if we were watching some testimony on television. So it is very hard to do, but you can sometimes, and you certainly try to.
Question from Slaytan. To what extent might Cassie Ventura's visible pregnancy influence jurors' emotional response and perception of her credibility? Will that have an impact on the jurors without them knowing?
I think it could. I mean, again, that's something that could cut both ways. I mean, in one sense, a juror could say, well, it appears that she's moved on and she has a life and has a family, and actually she seems to have come out of this okay. And that could be something that a jury could consider. It also, I think jurors have some sympathy for pregnancy, and it makes them like the witness a little better.
We have another question from Angelina. Who is Diddy's lawyer? He's got a lot of lawyers.
Right.
So he's got Xavier Donaldson. He's got Mark Agnifilo, Tenny Garagos. He's got Brian Steele. I mean, he's got a high-powered legal team. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a necessary thing. He needs a high-powered legal team. It's funny, the defense has the daughter of Mark Garagos, and I think the prosecution has the daughter of James Comey.
Correct.
So it's a second-generation trial in some respect. But they're really good. They're really good lawyers all around, and for the defense. And I would expect. I mean, this is a defendant who can afford top-level representation, which most defendants down facing federal charges can't. Is taking advantage of that.
We have another question from Content Channel. Couldn't she be charged with racketeering also, meaning Cassie, since she booked hotels and paid with her credit card, as stated by the previous witness, presumably referring to David Phillip, who is that male performer?
Yeah, I think some of these people are, as I said, a mix of victim and co-conspirator, and I also assume that the government is only interested or mostly interested in convicting Sean Combs. So probably they have an understanding that they're not going to bring any charges against her.
We have a question from OU812. Jesse, any idea how many witnesses the prosecution will be calling? I know it's an 8-week trial. I know the defense is going to be calling a lot of witnesses. I don't know how many the prosecution will call, but there is a strength in numbers. So aside from just the alleged victims, the more that they can get escorts, right? The more that they can get people who worked in Diddy's inner circle, that's going to be imperative in this case. And also, I imagine members of law enforcement.
I think that's true. I think you want strength in numbers. I'm gonna put one caveat there.
Please do.
If I'm the prosecution, I want to be careful when you show the jury this evidence, this really shocking evidence over and over and over again. They become more conditioned to seeing it, and their reaction to it the first time is much different than the reaction to it the 40th time. So you want to put in enough evidence to get your conviction, but you don't necessarily want to repeat the same thing again and again and again. It's not really helpful.
Want to hear something interesting? We took another poll. We're taking a lot of polls here on YouTube.
I love it.
Do you think Diddy's celebrity status will affect the outcome of proceedings? 59% say yes, 41% say no. Thoughts on that?
Well, his celebrity status affects the outcome of the proceedings. I mean, it affects the whole case, right? It's the only reason there is a case. It affects his ability to mount a defense and the quality of that defense. So I think that question more gets to what will the jury think when it considers that they're looking at a powerful celebrity here? Will that impact them one way or another? And once again, that can kind of go either way on a juror by juror basis. But I will tell you that jury charge is going to very much contain instruction that they're not supposed to take his celebrity into account in rendering a verdict.
It's interesting. We always have to ask that question after Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, because of his celebrity status and the way he testified was a big factor in that. We got a question from James K. Will individuals involved in these freak-offs be named? And so I think this goes to a larger question, right? Everybody, when Sean Combs was first indicted, who are the celebrities? Who's going to be named, right? It might not be, it might just be the alleged victims and the escorts. I mean, I think there's a difference between saying what the prosecution's asserting versus, oh my gosh, we're going to list every celebrity who knew what was going on and every celebrity that may or may not have participated. I don't think that could be a distraction, but I don't know. You tell me, I could be wrong.
Okay. So everybody's fascinated to hear what this list are. In somewhat in the same way, people always wanted to get the Epstein files and hear what that list is. People want to know who's involved. From the prosecution standpoint, it really wouldn't be that helpful to have a laundry list of celebrities who attended these freak-offs, because that would make it seem more and more like it's just a Hollywood thing. It's a thing that a lot of people participated in. You might not understand it, but this is what they do out there when they're rich and famous. I don't think that it helps that much. I know the public is very interested to know who else was involved.
We have a question from Makita Ramser. Do you think Sean Combs and R. Kelly's cases are similar? Now, let me just also say, he was convicted of something else. It was a racketeering case, but this was illegal sex with minors, sexual exploitation of minors. Sure, there was bribery, coercion, forced labor, and head of a giant music icon, people working for him, wealth, power, resources. But the minors component is what I think separates that case from Sean Combs.
I think the minors component makes it different. Obviously, it has some comparisons because it's the same industry and some of the allegations are similar, but there are also differences.
Yeah, and I can see that. And look, I think during the pretrial motions leading up, they cited a lot of cases that were similar. So I remember they cited Ghislaine Maxwell. I believe they cited R. Kelly's case. I think they even cited the Mike Jeffries case, Abercrombie and Fitch.
Oh, yeah.
That was in order for him to get bail, which was ultimately abandoned after losing so many times. Okay, so I have an update for you. We're getting Elizabeth Milner, our in-court reporter. She's coming out as soon as possible. And then she's got to jump back into court because they're going to come back after this lunch break. I got a question from Sharada Ramanthan. Won't the Cassie video clinch it since she has confirmed that it was after a freak off and not domestic violence? Is that video going to convict Sean Combs in and of itself?
No. Also, I challenge this idea that because it was after a freak off, it was not a domestic violence. I mean, if you take your partner force them into a group sex situation and then afterwards beat them, isn't that is domestic violence, right? Maybe something else, but I don't know that it's an and or kind of thing.
Yeah. This is a great question. They're all great questions. What I'm talking about, we got a great audience. From Rel, is the freak off tapes going to be viewed in court? I think the answer is no. I think the answer is no based upon what we heard earlier. If I was understanding.
Clarins worldwide bestseller double serum, 2 serums in 1 with epi-aging defense technology, 22 plants and 5 molecules, now in a light texture, barely there feel, same powerful results. Clarins double serum.
Questions are asked of the witness regarding what's occurring in the videos, we'll be careful. That's what I think you have to do.
Yeah. Let me explain. I think this will help how these courtrooms are set up, because I've tried cases in the federal building that they're in now. So you have in the front, there's the judge's bench, and the judge has a computer screen where he sees everything. And the witness box has a computer screen where the witness sees everything. And the jurors have multiple video in the juror box, so they can view it right there. And counsel have videos on their tables, on counsel tables. If you're sitting in the back in the galley, there is a big video monitor where usually whatever is being shown to a witness and the judge and everybody else is also displayed from the gallery. As I understood the back and forth this morning, they're trying to not have the worst evidence on that big video screen in the gallery, so that people who are just there to watch it won't see it. And they're also hooking up the jurors with headphones, so you won't hear the audio in the courtroom. So some of that stuff is going to be a little shielded from the public. And I'm not sure it's going to be filed on the public docket where anyone can get it.
The worst thing is if that gets released. That's the worst thing. If that gets released, that's a big problem. Okay, so we are going to take a break. We're waiting for Elizabeth Milner to come on. We're going to get her up in a second. I really want to know, how did Cassandra Ventura testify? It's one thing reading it off the transcript. It's another thing, how did she behave? What was her demeanor like? How was she answering the questions? How was the jury reacting to that? So we're going to get up that in a minute. Before we do, I thank all of our viewers for continuing to come on, watch us as we're breaking this down in real time. But one of the reasons we are able to put on this live show for you is because we get incredible support from our amazing sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. I want to call them out real quick. This is America's largest injury law firm. I'm talking about a firm that has secured a $6 million verdict for a car crash victim in Florida, $13 million for a wrongful auto death in Georgia. And by the way, $6 million for a trucking accident in New York. And mind you, keep something in mind, this was all after insurance offered their clients significantly less in each of these cases. And even if you think your case isn't worth millions of dollars, why not just start a claim and fight for what you deserve? Because Morgan & Morgan, they make it so simple. You can do it all right from your phone in just 8 clicks, from uploading contracts, signing documents, speaking to your legal team. It can all be done through your phone. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Live. You can also click the link below or scan the QR code on screen. Hope you can check it out. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this.
Okay, what we know so far is that Cassie has taken the stand today, and they've asked her questions about where she lived at in California. And also who paid for her rent. So we'll find out. When they come back, they'll have a reporter come out and give us a little bit more detail. Say hello to the baby. I'm going to mute the mic again. We'll wait. As we wait, let me know your thoughts on this Diddy case. I'm feeling like I can't wait to hear the evidence. It seems like his children are in the courtroom, and some people believe that the young girls should not be there to witness, some of the footage from the evidence that they have. So I'm just sitting here trying to figure out the case like everybody else. I'm over here trying to cook lunch for some kids. Well, what are your thoughts? Write to me in the chat. On Wednesday evening, myself and Brandy Janae will be discussing the case. We have opposing views on a lot of things, but it's good to have a heated debate about how we think everything is going. I like to go with the facts. I like to try to, be non-biased, so that way we can get the facts and not what we think. Once we can make our come to our own conclusions, but I think it is upon the prosecutor to bring forth the truth, and they have to bring forth without it's based on them trying to prove their case. So I'm not going to try to lead from this to that, either way or the other. But this case is the hot stuff now. This is another O.J. Simpson case. But too bad or a Michael Jackson case almost, it's high profile. Too bad we're not able to watch it, but this is a Fed case. Right now, I still hold the belief that I don't believe it should have been in federal court, maybe a state case, but we'll see as the evidence present themselves. So far, it looks like we definitely have a domestic violence case, but
And welcome back to our live coverage of the Sean Combs criminal case, criminal trial happening in downtown New York. We've been talking about the fact that right now, Cassandra Ventura, victim number one in this case, Diddy's ex-girlfriend, the prime focus of this whole case, has been testifying. And currently they're on a lunch break. But right now, I want to go live to Law and Crime's very own Elizabeth Milner, who is outside of the federal courthouse, was inside that court for when Cassandra Ventura was testifying. Elizabeth, it's great to see you. I know you have to jump back into court quite quickly. So let's first start off with Ventura. She takes the stand. How did she appear? What are some of the highlights of her testimony? And most importantly, how is the jury responding to her testimony?
Yeah, well, Jesse, when she had first kind of entered the courtroom, can't necessarily describe it as a tense moment necessarily, but I can only imagine what was kind of going through everybody's minds. You have Diddy's children on one side, his family on one side. You have Diddy, who was looking at Cassie as the moment that she walked inside that courtroom today. She was wearing a long brown dress. She is very, very much so, appears to be in her third trimester of her pregnancy. And so she kind of walked very quietly and very slowly up to the witness stand, took swore the oath and that type of sort, and then sat down for the prosecution's questioning. And as far as who her support was inside that courtroom, that included her brother, what we presume to be her mother, as well as even her husband, Alex Fine. And he was kind of the topic of some of these arguments outside of the presence of the jury, mainly about just some testimony that they're expected to happen, especially later on today or even possibly tomorrow, because she is expected to be on the stand for a while. But as far as when she got onto the stand, she was very soft-spoken when she was answering ASA Emily Johnson's question. She, we've been following this case from the beginning, from the moment that she had filed that federal lawsuit that was just very shocking, a very bombshell lawsuit that we all know was settled the following day. But as far as just kind of comparing the allegations to her witness testimony, it was kind of a difference in the sense that we had only seen her allegations through words, through paper, through court filings and that sort. But, when she got on the stand, it's now, for jurors in their minds, they're putting a voice and they're putting a person to, a name. Finally, they're seeing just from her side of the view, just kind of her relationship with Diddy. Much of the testimony was very foundational. When did she meet Diddy? How long before, the two engaged in sexual intercourse? As well as, she was briefly asked about the CNN video. And she did confirm that she was leaving a freak off when the vicious beating kind of happened. As far as just some other big highlights, we were shown a lot of photos of her and Sean, as she refers to him, in court, as well as her friends. We saw a photo of him being Diddy, Kim Porter, another friend, and Cassie all at the 2006 BET Awards. We saw a photo of Diddy with Cassie, another friend, and another potential witness to this case, all sitting on a couch. We had seen photos of their trip to Miami. We saw photos of them at a strip club together here in New York City in 2007 for Halloween. She had spoken about just, her time working as an artist for Bad Boy, and just that pretty much, some of these allegations she had talked about in her lawsuit, but also that Diddy controlled a lot of aspects of her recording career. She signed a 10-album deal. However, she only put out one album plus a mixtape. A lot of the songs that she had even recorded had just gone either, unreleased, or they were leaked and that type of sort. And so some of those were like kind of the big highlights, I would say. They were kind of touching base on who all else kind of played a role in, as far as, security. She had named people like D-Rock and Bounds and Uncle Paulie and Malik. As far as assistants, we heard one of the big names being Christina Coram, as well as David James, Neil Dominic. And so that was kind of touching base a little bit as far as, how Diddy's staff kind of interacted with her. But for the most part, another eye-opening point was just that, Diddy had security around him 24/7. But she also had said that, sometimes the security's job was to kind of check on her and make sure that she was doing what she was supposed to, essentially, that, if she wasn't answering the phone when Diddy had called.
A record-breaking heat wave hits the U.S. with no power at home. Tom's life has continued on as normal.
We'll get into more details as far as kind of, the freak offs and that type of those types of allegations. But, it really did start off pretty foundational. And I was pretty surprised at, how composed she was keeping it all while on the stand. Again, she was very soft spoken, but she answered the questions directly. If there was something that she was confused about or wanted Emily Johnson to rephrase or just to ask again, she was open about that. There were very brief moments of laughter, but that was just because, it was nothing that had to do with any of those graphic allegations or anything like that. But it was just, pretty much, she was asked, like, why didn't you release more albums? She's like, is that a question for me? And then there was a little chuckle, but for the most part, it was very much a serious tone. A lot of eyes were on Cassie. A lot of eyes were also on Diddy's children when they were talking, for example, about Kim Porter and just how that relationship had ended while Cassie was starting her relationship with Diddy. And so we got to kind of see finally for a while now, because it's almost been 2 years since she had filed her lawsuit at this point, that we kind of got to see her explain her own view from her own mouth, as opposed to us seeing these allegations in like lawsuits and that type of sort.
So I have two questions for you. One, how is the jury responding to her testimony and more of the graphic points of her testimony? But also, what was Diddy doing? What was Sean Combs doing? Was he looking at her? Was she looking at him at any points? So again, what was the jury's reaction and what was the reaction between Diddy and Cassie?
Well, let me tell you, it was a very packed courtroom, so it was really hard to kind of see all the jurors in their faces. But from the little view that I got of just seeing these jurors, they were listening intently, like they have been even since yesterday, taking notes, kind of watching back and forth, both, the prosecution asked their questions and then going over and kind of looking at the witness, that being Cassie, while on the stand. Now, as far as Diddy goes, he was watching very intently. Like, let me tell you something. He is very much so participating in his defense. He is jotting notes down. He's passing these notes, because we do know when the cross-examination comes down, it's going to be Ana Maria Esteval who's going to be doing that line of questioning once the defense does get to the cross of Cassie's testimony. But as far as Diddy goes, he definitely kept his eyes on Cassie for the most duration while she was on the stand, which I can only imagine felt intimidating on her end. Possibly, I'm obviously not in her mind, so I don't know that 100% or anything like that. But as far as Cassie looking back in Diddy's direction, even when she had gotten off the stand, she didn't look at him once. She just walked immediately outside through the gallery, didn't look at him, didn't look at his children. There was no type of like soft smile, none of that. I think, even she might not have noticed her husband was right there in the courtroom too, but she kept laser focused, got out of the door. And then that's when everybody else kind of left the courtroom for lunch break.
Pretty surreal, to say the least. Let me ask you this. At the beginning of the day, we kind of got a sense of what's going to happen next. Everybody's been talking about the freak-off tapes or these sex tapes and how they're going to be visible in the courtroom, whether or not the gallery is going to see these tapes. I imagine when she's going to have to talk about these tapes, she's going to have to view these tapes. What was the discussion earlier this morning regarding the tapes, how a witness will be questioned about the tapes, and whether or not anybody in the gallery will ultimately see them?
Yeah, so there was a lot of concerns about these exhibits, mainly more so, I guess, from us on the press ends portion, just seeing that these photos were sexually explicit and very graphic in nature. The government planned to show some of these images because they, according to the government, were 6 still images. They were nude images of victims that were sexually explicit, but the government kind of came up with a solution that, they would provide headphones to the jurors, so that way, we wouldn't hear any type of audio of, these exhibits that were going to be portrayed. The government wanted to keep this material out of public record. The defense, meanwhile, says it's pretty much adult pornography. And so that's when we kind of started connecting the dots that these were, videos and images of, these freak-offs that the government is kind of talking about that's central to their case. The defense says it's a privacy issue, and they question what us in the press would pretty much do with these types of images. And you know what? We have a right to kind of talk about them, especially not in a salacious manner or anything like that. I don't think that was any of our intents on, being in the courtroom while these images were played or anything like that. But apparently it seems like, a point for the defense that, they were just wondering what the press would do about it, especially with so many eyes on this case. And so, they wanted to address this issue. The media did have a response through a lawyer. Not 100% sure what outlet they were with, but the media's response was pretty much that the press needs to see these. The testimony isn't necessarily suitable for these images, because the big question is, was this consensual or was this coerced? And so the media lawyer offered maybe just the pool of reporters to see these types of images, so that way there would at least be some media in the room, so that way we could report about this. And so from the media's response, they completely objected to total sealment of these images and says that it's a First Amendment issue. And so this is going to be taken up probably at a later time, possibly when we all come back from the lunch break, just to kind of get a better picture of it. But it seems like, from both parties that they're kind of fearful about these images getting out. But on our side, we have a right to report on what's going on. I mean, look at just the media campouts just behind me. A lot of people have interest in this, not just for salacious headlines or anything like that, but because this is a very high profile and criminal case. And of course, we will respectfully report on it if we are able to see these images.
Real quick, Elizabeth, I want to get you back in that courtroom. 30 seconds. If you could just explain what the scene is like today.
Well, the scene is very much so a lot of high energy, a lot of anxious energy. And maybe I'm just saying my own personal feelings, because it was pretty tense this morning, as a lot of people were just trying to battle to get inside that courtroom, because everyone wanted to be in there when Cassie took the stand. Everyone wanted to see her raise her right hand, swear an oath, and to get inside that courtroom. So there was a little tense moments from people either cutting in lines or people trying to get ahead as well. But as far as, from the family's perspective, I had mentioned yesterday that the daughters had walked out during Daniel Phillips' testimony. That wasn't the case today. Everyone stayed in court, stayed in place. They were listening to all the testimony that was going on today. And so for the most part, it just seems like, okay, this is day 2. A lot of people are just wanting to know more information. What are we going to be getting out of this case? Is this a criminal case, or is this, very much so possibly a domestic violence case, as the defense is trying to kind of paint it out? But as far as the mood inside that courtroom, it's very tense, I will say, mainly because a lot of people just have their eyes on this very important testimony from one of the biggest witnesses and one of the biggest players inside this case today.
Elizabeth Milner, thank you so much for being our eyes and our ears about what's happening in that courtroom. No cameras, no audio equipment, but we got Elizabeth, and she does a fantastic job. Thank you so much. And I know you have to head back into court. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to continue to take your questions. I am here once again with trial attorney Rich Schoenstein. So, Rich, you heard that description, okay? You heard the description about her testimony. We've been talking about it, hearing the jurors' reaction, hearing, by the way, how Cassandra Ventura responded, or lack of response, towards Diddy, not even looking over his way, him staring intently at her. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And it's hard for a witness, what's the right thing to do? Is the right thing to look at him? Is the right thing not to look at him? I think probably not looking at him is better optics as she takes the stand. I think that's fine.
When she's going to be in a position where she has to watch these tapes, presumably that's what's going to happen, and have to be questioned about these tapes, both under direct examination and cross-examination. I know Elizabeth has said she's very calm and composed. I wonder if things might change then, and what we should take away from that testimony.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough thing to do. She's going to be asked about the tapes. She's also going to be asked to describe what's happening. She's going to be asked to identify people who are in that video. She's going to be asked to, identify the prostitutes, right? Because that's a big part of this case. So who is paid to be there in these videos? And she's almost going to have to do like a play-by-play, and it's incredibly uncomfortable. I don't know how she's going to deal with it.
I think the most significant parts of the tapes are if you see or hear Sean Combs directing her,
right,
and particularly in a aggressive manner to take certain steps or actions, that will go towards sex trafficking.
Yeah, and she's probably been through these tapes. I mean, that they've taken her through them many times to prepare for the trial, to go over, to get the case ready, to figure out who everybody is. So it's a little different when you get on a witness stand and do it in front of a jury, but it's not the first time she's looking at it.
We're taking your questions right now again on YouTube as we wait for the testimony of Cassandra Ventura to resume. Question from Nomad. How many kids does he have? I believe he has 7 children. A question from Sarah McGowan. Can charges for co-conspirators come from this trial?
Well, I don't think they come from the trial necessarily. They come from the investigation leading up to the trial. And it's a question here whether the government wants to bring charges against co-conspirators or others. I think they were more interested in having witnesses. I said when this all started that probably people were deciding if they were going to be witnesses or they were going to be defendants, because I bet the government brought some pressure to bear on that decision.
Question from Alpha and Omega Forever. Will the prosecution subpoena other celebrities seen in the evidence later in the case? That's presuming there are celebrities that are, well, let me rephrase. In the lead up to this trial, during the jury selection process, there was a people and places list, right? Does the jury know any of these people and places? There were some celebrity names on there. Doesn't mean they're in the tapes, doesn't mean they're part of relevant evidence, but will the prosecution subpoena celebrities in this trial?
Yeah, I don't know. That goes back to the discussion we were having. Is it actually in the prosecution's favor to drag other celebrities into this and make it maybe seem like a Hollywood thing? If they had certain people who had important testimony to give and were willing to cooperate and do it, then they might want to put it on. But I don't know if that's happening.
Question from Rachel Wilson. If people outside the courthouse admit they're trying to influence the jury, not just protesting, could they be held accountable for that?
I don't know if they can be held accountable. You know, we see this now in trials. There's a trial some people are watching in Massachusetts where there's been a big fight about who can be in front of the courthouse and how far do they have to
Karen
be from
Reed,
the
for anybody
courthouse.
who doesn't know.
Yeah, that's it. You've heard of it. So if it starts to be a problem, then the parties can address it with the court, and the court has some power to say, yeah, we're not going to let anybody line up where the jurors come in and out, because that would be hard for them, right? That's the one thing you don't want them doing, is influencing the jury. Otherwise, people have a right to be outside the courthouse. They have a right to make their opinion known.
I will tell you, the time that I saw this in a way I've never seen before was Johnny Depp, Amber Heard. When I was in that courtroom, when Amber Heard was testifying, the courtroom was filled with Johnny Depp supporters. And I will tell you, as she was testifying, there were snickers. There were people murmuring under their breath. The court deputy had to come over and tell people to be quiet. That created a different environment, and I didn't like it. And that was a problem, because from a purely legal point of view, you don't want that outside pressure on the witnesses, on the court, on the attorneys, on the jury. I didn't like it.
So now you're talking about a different thing, because there's all sorts of opinion and discussion on social media. And then there's people outside the courthouse. But what you're talking about is people inside the courthouse. And that conduct, the judge absolutely should have an iron fist about. And if there's a person watching that trial who snickers, they should be out of the courtroom.
Yeah.
Right? That should be instantaneous. And if necessary, I'm big on public access. Trials are supposed to be accessible to the public. But if that public access interferes with the fairness of the trial, then it needs to be addressed. And then you need to put some guidelines, you need to put some guardrails on it.
Got a question from Sham Adam. I have a question. What has Cassie's domestic abuse have to do with the RICO case? Are they related?
Yeah, well, I think that domestic abuse includes making her have sex acts with prostitutes. That relates to transporting prostitutes across state lines or transporting them for criminal activity. I think it's all interconnected. I don't know whether the actual physical abuse is itself a predicate act. I don't know that.
So this goes to another question from Stephen Plantain. What kind of technology will be used in the courtroom to allow the jurors to view any video evidence, one big screen or individual screens for each juror? I'm going back to what was reported earlier, and Elizabeth was talking about it too, where the public has a right to know what's happening at the trial. that we wouldn't show the videos. The prosecutor says we wouldn't show the videos to the courtroom gallery. The jurors and everyone in the well would wear headphones. So it does become a question if they have individual screens. Yeah, and so it becomes what's going to be in the sealing order. But you heard a little bit from Elizabeth too. But the jurors are going to have quite the view of that video.
The jurors sit in the Southern District of New York. There are 2 rows of jury seats, and there are video screens in front of them. I don't remember if it's 1 screen per juror. It is.
But that's common. You can have that.
It is, but it is multiple screens. So they're watching it on a screen. That courthouse typically isn't set up. Some courthouses have 1 giant screen where everybody watches it. And then you can't shield anything from the public because everybody can see it. But I think most of the courtrooms in the Southern District have individual screens for the jurors and then a screen for the gallery that you can shut off.
Yeah. We have a super chat question from Mindy H. Thank you so much, Mindy. Really appreciate it. Did Cassie sign an immunity deal in order to testify? So you couple that with what we talked about before. If she is really a participant in all of this activity, although it becomes a question, how are you a participant in your own abuse? That would make sense. I don't think you could be a participant in your own sex trafficking, but did she sign an immunity deal to testify?
I certainly would have asked for one if I was her. I
Really?
don't know. Oh, absolutely. She's the star witness in this RICO trial against Sean Combs. They want her.
Meaning she could be a participant in other people's abuse or alleged abuse.
Yes. So she should have said, if I'm going to testify to all of this stuff, then I want to make sure you're not going to prosecute me for it. Because in theory, some of the things she's being asked, she could have taken the Fifth. She's participating arguably in some criminal conduct. So for her to agree to do that, I wouldn't be surprised if she has an immunity agreement.
It was ruled that her husband, Alex Fine, would be allowed to be in court for parts of her testimony. There was a back and forth discussion about whether or not it should be permitted because he may be called as a witness depending upon what she says on the stand. What's your take on him being allowed to be in the courtroom, and why could that be an issue?
Okay, so typically you have an exclusion order that witnesses can't be in the courtroom prior to their testimony, right? So most fact witnesses aren't allowed in the courtroom to see what other fact witnesses had to say. That's for the sanctity of their testimony. You can make exceptions to that in special circumstances. And so someone said to the judge, given everything in this case, she needs the support of having her husband. And by the way, he is a tangential witness. Like, I don't even, like, do you know what he's going to be asked about?
Maybe if she ever made any mention about maybe the lawsuit,
but that's tangential. He's not a victim. He's not claiming he was abused by Sean Combs.
Well, I think a big theme is her filing the lawsuit, right? Yeah. And the question would become, did she mention anything about, her intentions of filing a lawsuit or settling the lawsuit? I don't know.
Right. Well, the judge balanced those things and decided that he can be in the courtroom. I don't have a problem with that.
So we've been running a number of polls on YouTube, and thank you so much for your participation. I think it's quite illuminating to get your responses to this because you wonder what the jury might be thinking. Question: do you believe the settlement between Cassie Ventura and Sean Diddy Combs indicates guilt? You ready for this? 80% say yes, 20% say no. Wow.
No. I say no. I would be in the minority of this thing. People settle lawsuits all the time, even if they think they might win in court. Just the idea of litigating sometimes. Forget about being a star. You have a lawsuit. It's going to require you to expend so much money on lawyers. You're going to have to go to court. It's going to tie you up for a couple years. Then you're going to go in front of a jury who's going to decide this claim, and who knows what they'll decide. So lots and lots of people for business decisions settle litigation, even though they don't think they're liable. Happens every day. It does not prove guilt in and of itself.
This is your specialization. So if anybody has the right opinion about it, it's Rich Schoenstein. Okay, question from Allie Jones. Will the videos be made public ever? You know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question.
Probably not.
I was listening to Elizabeth Milner, who was reporting from outside the courthouse, and she's fantastic. I've been on with her many times. And she was saying, the people in the media, they want to have access to it so they can report on it, not for any salacious,
Sure.
just so they can report on it. Yes, I would trust Elizabeth with those videos. There are a lot of people on the YouTube that I would not trust with those videos. There are people who want access to those videos to turn them into money-making endeavors one way or another, and potentially to embarrass the people that are in those videos who aren't on trial for anything. So I think there are some pretty serious privacy concerns here.
I agree. I don't necessarily look. I'm in the media. I think that there's an issue to report on what's being seen because it's a piece of evidence. However, I don't necessarily believe it should be released. I think there's just too much danger. I think the risk outweighs the benefit. Okay, so again, by the way, the reason we're showing you courtroom sketches, the reason we're having Elizabeth Milner come out and do a play-by-play of what happened in court, the reason Rich and I are on air right now and doing live reporting about Cassie Ventura's testimony, which is about to start up again, is because there are no cameras in the courtroom. There's no audio in the courtroom. It's not like Lori Vallow Daybell. I think that is a big issue. I think it's a problem. I've heard the counter arguments before. It might raise a risk of ensuring a fair trial, that there could be a risk to the jurors. There could be an issue for the lawyers, the judge. I don't buy it. I think that this is a case of too much public interest involving very important issues, but yet the federal courts have never changed on that.
Yeah. The federal courts and also New York state courts don't allow generally cameras in the courtroom, and I hate it. I'm a big believer in public access to the courts, especially these days, because we have so much second guessing about the court system and complaining about the court system. And this judge is biased, and this judge needs to be impeached, and people get treated favorably. And there's no better cure to that than to let people inside the courtroom and see how a trial works and see what a judge really does and see how a jury deals with it. And especially in a case like this, that's high profile, and by the way, has some very important issues in the trial as to what is acceptable and what is not acceptable conduct, what is consent and what is not consent. These are issues we should be thinking about and talking about. They should allow cameras in those courtrooms. Absolutely.
And look, we're trying our best to take the transcripts, the actual verbatim transcripts, use them in our various shows that you can check out on YouTube. We're also experimenting with this AI recreation. So taking the transcripts, using them to create, again, AI depictions of what was happening in that courtroom. You can check it on YouTube. We're experimenting a little bit with there. So we have a super chat question. Thank you so much. This is from Zenpai. Can civil discovery aid the feds? So I wonder if you're talking about discovery and all the lawsuits, can that be used to help the feds in this criminal case?
In theory, it could. I don't know if those civil suits are really going forward. For the most part, civil litigation in a matter like this will be stayed pending the criminal investigation. Because, for example, you can't take a deposition of Sean Combs while he's under trial for federal crimes. So usually the civil litigation actually lags behind. But if there is discovery, it could be used. And certainly what the victims have, right? You would think somebody from the federal government has called every single person who's brought a lawsuit against Sean Combs to ask them about the facts and to try to get whatever evidence they have.
Got another question from Danny. Danny asked a question earlier today. Got another question. Should Diddy have taken the plea deal, right? There was reporting that he rejected a deal. Now, when this case first broke, I was of the opinion, there's no way he's taking a deal, right? He's rushing towards a trial. It's remarkable that you have a trial going at the federal level in under a year from an arrest and indictment. To me, not only did he feel that he could beat the case, he didn't want to spend one more day in lockup. And I didn't think he was going to take a deal. I didn't think it was likely. He apparently rejected some sort of offer. We don't know what it was. Guests have said to me, as this case progresses, as this trial progresses, he may actually want to take a deal in the middle of the trial. I don't know if it would still be on the table. Your thoughts?
Well, I expect some sort of deal. The question is, what is the deal, right? Should he take a deal? I assume there's no offer they would ever make him that doesn't involve jail time.
And I would say double digits.
Double-digit jail time. I agree with that. So now you have a real quagmire for him, right? You have a real decision for him to make. Do I want to agree? And we have viewers who think him entering into a civil settlement of a civil lawsuit is confession of wrongdoing. How do you think they're going to feel if he takes a plea deal, right?
Yeah.
So it's a public relations disaster. It's jail for a long period of time, and it's a concession by him. I mean, would he take a deal? I bet if you offered him a year in jail, he would take a deal, but I don't know if you're saying 20.
Yeah, it does become a question when you're looking at potentially life in prison and on the sex trafficking charge, minimum 15 years in prison. I've got a question from Negi. Is it possible with his power, celeb status, that those testifying change their mind based on being scared of him? It's an interesting question considering we have this problem with alleged victim number 3 and her testifying, not testifying, can be found, not be found. What do you think?
I think it is. I think it is a concern, certainly, that the government would have. I think that's something they had to think about with every single witness they wanted to bring in as a potential victim. And I think it is a motivation to get those victims on the stand as soon as possible.
We answered this already. This was a question from Jesse K. Do you think there's a chance that Diddy will plead guilty at some time during the trial once he realizes he might be going down to get a lesser sentence? We talked about that. Cassandra Ventura is going to continue her direct examination. It's 1:13 p.m. Not exactly sure if that's going to continue for the rest of the day, and then they get to cross maybe tomorrow. Cross-examination of an alleged victim, star witness in this case. Case rises and falls based on her testimony, I personally think. How do you cross-examine her? She's, 8.5 months pregnant? By the way, we're going to be releasing courtroom sketches. We're kind of got a quick glimpse of them. She looks quite pregnant, okay? My question is, how do you cross-examine her if you're the defense in a way that doesn't turn the jury against you?
So it is a tough thing to do because you have to cross-examine her. You can't take a pass on it. What I would do if I was cross-examining her is I would try to start by finding some things I could test her credibility on, even if they weren't important. Like if there's something she testified to that I can show is not true, I would put that in front of the jury so they immediately begin to question her honesty. I would spend a lot of time showing the positives of the relationship, the duration, the happy photographs. I'm sure there are social media posts, whatever there was, quotes of her commenting about the relationship. I would spend a lot of time on consent to the various acts that were done. And I don't know that you can do that much. You can't go after this way. You can't go after a victim with that video and her sitting on the stand 8 months pregnant and all you've heard. You can't go up and think you're going to rip her to shreds. You have to be really shrewd about this.
Have a question from D. Williams. If you're subpoenaed to show up, you must show up. If they don't, you're going to get arrested.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fundamentally.
But people still do it.
I mean, well, sure. But also where were you, you have to be a certain distance from the courthouse to be subpoenaed. So there are some issues, but yes, people duck subpoenas.
I have a question for you. I want to circle back to day one, yesterday. The first witnesses who testified, the security guard who had worked at the LA Intercontinental Hotel, the whole Cassandra Ventura tape, David Phillip, this male performer who claims he was paid to have sex with Cassie, as Combs watched and pleasured himself, baby oil, Astroglide, that whole stuff. Do you think those were good witnesses for the prosecution?
Yeah, I think they were fine. The security guard is good because he has no real skin in the game.
Yeah.
Is just a security guard, so he kind of has instant credibility, and he brings this tape into play,
And police officer.
and brings into play immediately the idea that they were trying to buy the tape to hide it, which I think is an important part of that whole story. So I think they were fine. I think it would have been weird to be like, okay, we're done opening statements. Witness one, here's Cassie. I think that would have been too soon.
Well, again, and I mentioned, I said, David, it was Daniel Phillip. Look, I go back to what I said earlier. You establish her credibility. You build it up with other witnesses. You build it up with the tape. So when she testifies, the jury is in a much different position to analyze her. Again, the same thing happened in real time. I think when you talk about her suing Sean Combs in November of 2023, one thing to take away, are her allegations true or not? That video comes out, changes the entire scenario, entire game. You had the openings, though. They were relatively short. I was always predicting that maybe the openings would last the entire day. Relatively short in a complicated RICO and sex trafficking case, not bit by bit. I imagine the closings will be a bit longer. Is that unusual? Do you like a longer opening statement or a shorter opening statement?
No, short opening statements are smart. Short opening statements as a general matter are smart because you can't go up there and tell the jury everything you're going to prove over 8 weeks. You can't tell them every witness. You can't tell them every piece of evidence you're going to introduce. You can't discuss the law. You can't go over all the counts. You have to give them a general view of the case. And I thought from what I read, both the prosecution and the defense did that. I think an hour is perfect for an opening.
Well, let me also give you an update. Officially, Cassandra Ventura is back on the stand. So we're going to provide you updates and reports on her testimony as it continues. You have to imagine, I don't think I'm wrong by saying that this case rises and falls with her, right? She is the star witness. She is victim number one. There are going to be other alleged victims who testify, but if the jury says, I don't buy it, they're going to go into maybe looking at the other alleged victims a little differently, right? And plus, if they don't buy it and they believe maybe the other alleged victims, you said it before, you can't build a racketeering sex trafficking case on just one victim, or maybe you can. I don't know. I mean, you could, because they're individually charged. There's sex trafficking of victim one and sex trafficking of victim two.
She is the most important witness in the case from what I know, because you have the most serious allegations of his abuse of an individual person about her. And if the jury concluded that that was all nonsense, that she was a consensual participant in a relationship, it would very much undermine the prosecution.
Okay, first update from her back on the stand. Prosecutor asks, who is your manager at Bad Boy Records? And Cassandra Ventura says, James Cruz. What did he tell you? Ventura responds that he was managing me with one hand tied behind his back. He had to check everything with Sean. Why is that important?
Well, because Sean's the head of this alleged criminal enterprise. Everything flows through Sean Combs. So that's what they have to show.
Remember, we talked about release of the sex tapes, the freak off tapes. So we put another poll up there. Should the public have access to trial footage and testimonies? What do you think? What do you think the percentage was?
Should they have access to trial?
Should the public have access to trial footage and testimonies? So I guess that includes everything.
North of 90%, yes.
That's correct. 91% say yes, 9% say no. I'll correct it. I didn't mean actually the videotapes per se, but access to trial footage and testimony. That's my audience. That's the audience we like.
Well, the
to hear.
people who are on YouTube watching us
Yes.
want to see what's happening in the trial for sure.
Rel asks, what if the hotel video is the only evidence the feds have? It's not the only evidence the feds have.
It's not.
Particularly because it's the Southern District of New York. They don't go against somebody like a Sean Combs unless they have the goods.
Yeah, I don't think this case would be tried in the fashion it's being tried unless the prosecutors were very sure that they had the evidence they needed.
Rachel Stockman, our president here at Law and Crime, has asked a question. Hi, Rachel. Since she is the key witness, do you think it's smart to put her on so early during the trial? I do. I said it before. I'll say it again. I think it was brilliant to not even start with her, but to start with the security guard, to start with the 2016 video, to start with this male performer. You build up her credibility. So when she takes the stand, the jury is a much more beneficial position to evaluate her testimony. It's, again, I go back to what I said. She filed her lawsuit in November of 2023. These were wild, unheard of allegations. You wondered, telling the truth, not telling the truth. As soon as that video came out, it not only corroborated one particular moment in her complaint, arguably corroborated her entire account. She is the star witness. I also think from a practical point of view, she's got to testify early before she gives birth.
Right.
Because the worst thing about not having victim number 3 is not having victim number 1 testify.
And I'll add one other thing. I'll add one other thing to that. So she's the star witness because of the allegations of what he did to her. She's also, I assume, the witness who's going to cover the broadest topic areas, right? She was with him for 10 years. So she not only knows what happened to her, but she knows about him. She knows about his businesses. She knows about this alleged criminal enterprise. She knows about other predicate acts. And typically at trial, if you have a witness like that who really covers a large area of what you're trying to prove, you put him up sooner rather than later, because it doesn't make any sense to put on a lot of little witnesses and then bring in the big one.
I agree. I agree. Okay, so we have another update from court. Prosecutor asks Cassandra Ventura, how did you make money if your records weren't being released? Ventura responds, I did hosting parties when Sean approved them. What comments did Sean make about your physical appearance? That I look too Mexican with my hair like that. Now, this goes back to what was in the indictment. In the indictment, there was an allegation that Sean Combs controlled all aspects of her life. Her money, her career, her physical appearance. There's a question about medical records. Control is a central aspect of sex trafficking, and sex trafficking is one of the underlying crimes of racketeering, right? I mean, that seems to be the value of that testimony, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. He's directing how she appears. He's directing whether or not she can do hosting parties. He basically has to approve everything that she wants to do. That comment about her looking too Mexican is interesting because that comment is not really relevant to any of the allegations. And it's a little prejudicial depending on who's sitting on that jury because it paints him as maybe being a bit prejudiced.
Well, could the defense work with it and say, he's interested in helping your career? Okay, he's managed a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
He was making a judgment, maybe racist or not, making a judgment about how to help you. He's a concerned boyfriend. He's a concerned
He's a
manager.
micromanager.
Right.
We concede he's a micromanager. He's got his hand in everything. And, you know, if you think that's too much, so be it. But that doesn't make him a racketeer.
Do you think the strength in numbers of the people who had worked with Sean Combs, if they testified, chiefs of staff, a chef, assistants, do you think that's going to help the prosecution or could it work to their disadvantage? You have so many people who are now coming out saying they're disgruntled, saying they saw issues, but why they keep on working with him. I wonder the strength in numbers argument with the people who were around him.
Yeah, I don't, you know, just from what we know about him and his business success, and really his success story obviously is getting sort of pushed aside because of this trial, but it's really remarkable what he built in terms of entertainment and in terms of business. And so he did have a lot of people working for him. A guy like that had a lot of people working for him. That doesn't make him a racketeer either. And it's interesting if the jury thinks those people show up at trial and they still like him. That could resonate with the jury.
Well, the defense didn't shy away from the fact you're probably not going to like this guy. I mean, they said it, and I kind of respect them for doing that. Doesn't mean it's a defense. Okay, another update from court. The prosecutor asks, how did he like your nails? And Ventura responds, white, French tipped. Prosecutor asks, hair? It varied. I shaved my head in 2009. What about your body? He told me to work out, prepare for the freak-offs. How did you feel about his comments? It varied. So, you know, mixed bag there about what to take away from that. Yeah, I think, you know, talking about preparing for the freak-offs is something, but the idea of her saying my response varied, I think that helps her credibility. Right. And she didn't say, I hated every second of it. I felt trapped. She's right. That helps.
I think she's got to do that. I think it's important for her not to try to come across as a captive hostage at the beck and call of him every minute for 10 years. There's
Right.
got to be a little bit of nuance there.
Because even though she's the star witness, you don't want her to appear like she's a crusader against Sean Combs. You want her just to.
Oh,
Why can that backfire?
no, you want to. The most important thing is that the jury believes her.
Correct.
The most important thing is that's more important than what she says, because she's going to say a variety of bad things about him. They had the one thing on video. You want the jury to believe her. If the jury thinks she's a liar, then she could have set up any of this.
The prosecutor asks, this is another update from court. Again, no cameras, no audio. We're doing our best to report back to you in real time about Cassandra Ventura's testimony that's happening right now as we speak. How did Sean pay for, what else did Sean pay for? She replies, cars. Did he give you cash? Yes, but he would take things away depending upon how he felt. What else would he take away? This is an interesting response. My self-confidence. Who would take things away? Staff. That is racketeering, right? The more you include staff, the more you include help, the more you show there's a common enterprise. I guess that's, am I stretching it too much?
No, you're going in the right direction, but there's got to be some more specifics in that testimony. Staff took away my self-confidence. What does that mean? Somebody did something. They have to show specifically what staff did, and they have to show that it was ultimately directed by Sean Combs.
Got a question from SL600. Can the jury view the threat to write a tell book if she wasn't paid as extortion? I don't know if I follow that one.
So was she threatening to write a tell-all book? I don't know what else she would have written after that complaint that was filed in 2023. Did she threaten to write a tell-all book, and is that extortion? It would go to credibility, right?
Yeah.
This idea that she sued him for the money, she wants to write a tell-all book, she's made a deal with the prosecution, she's still marketing herself. Those are all credibility issues that the defense can try to drag out.
Another update. Remember when she said that staff would take things away? So Cassandra Ventura kind of corrected that answer and said, I assume staff. The defense objected. The judge said, jury will disregard that last answer. Prosecutor says, who took your laptop and phone? Ventura responds, security. Prosecutor says, how long would they be gone for? Ventura responds, however long I was being punished for. Thoughts?
Yes. Well, that gets at it. When she's being punished, right? She's in a relationship with Sean Combs. So you don't think even when there's a person who has a lot of staff because he's rich and famous, you don't think of them getting the staff involved in the domestic part. So the staff shouldn't be involved in punishing your girlfriend. And that gets you into sort of predicate act territory.
If you were the prosecution, should you dedicate just a full day to everybody who worked for Combs and helped him facilitate this alleged illegal activity? You just dedicate 1 or 2 days, just staff member, staff member, staff member, staff member.
So I don't know how I would do it exactly, but if I was prosecuting the case, I would try to build an org chart. I would try to build a demonstrative I could show the jury that would have Sean Combs on the top and lines that flow down to his various staff members. And then I would add to that demonstrative the specific things those various staff members did to Cassie or otherwise relevant in the case, and try to show that it all flowed down through this enterprise, through this organization.
We have a super chat question. Thank you so much from Get Right 904, Mike a Beast. Why should we care if Diddy's lawyer goes hard at her? She was down for everything. She married his trainer. Of course, Diddy stopped giving her money. Then out of nowhere, she sues. She was finding men and girls. So you have somebody here who has legitimate objections to Cassandra Ventura, who I think this will be a struggle for the prosecution. You know, I think saying that everything was coerced and everything was against her will could 100% be true, but also may be difficult. I go back to what I said before. It's not a classic sex trafficking case where you have a shadowy organization who is kidnapping girls from another country, selling them off to somebody else. She testifies, explains what happens to her. She was trafficked. This is different. And I wonder if Get Right 904 Mike DeBeast's concerns are legitimate.
So
I think they are.
As I hear that question, they're asking, why should we care if the cross-examination goes hard? And if you have the views that question suggests, you should care because it could hurt the efficacy of the cross-examination with the jury, who doesn't necessarily, sitting there on day 2 of the trial, have the same views as the person who wrote that question. And you cannot look like you're up there bullying this victim of domestic abuse who's now 8 months pregnant. It's going to get you in trouble.
Would you like some company? Because I know I
Yes.
sure would. I love hanging out with you, Rich, and you're going to stay with us. But guess who we got? We got former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani, who's with us right now. Nima, join the party.
Nima.
Thanks so much. Good to see you. So we've been talking about Cassandra Ventura. Oh, man, almost for 2 hours straight. What are you taking away from her testimony? What do you think there are the strengths of what she said so far? And do you see openings for the defense to exploit?
I do see openings for the defense. Look, she's calm. She's been pretty soft-spoken. She's whispering. Obviously, she's very pregnant, 8.5 months pregnant. I think what I would want to see is how she holds up on cross. I mean, these are softball questions. She did talk about how she fell in love with him, and that really goes to that consent issue, right? How much of this was consensual? How much of it was coerced? Me and Rich have been talking about this. So I think what I would want is to see more evidence of the violence, things that Philip talked about yesterday, the hair pulling, the glass being thrown at her, right? Obviously, her being punched, the purple eye. I mean, no human being would consent to those types of things. So the extent that we can have more violence and less just freaky sex would be helpful for the guy.
I think they're building up to that, Nima, right? They say, how did you begin your relationship? Building up the level of control, 17-year age difference, taking things away from her, what she can do, what she can't do, and then you throw in the violence. And I said it before, I'll say it again. It seems to me, Nima, that as soon as the argument comes, well, what happens if she said no? Or what happens if she objected? Look what happened with the 2016 video. I wonder if they're going to dedicate a significant amount of time to that video and what happened.
Oh, absolutely. And it was a big issue during jury selection and a big issue from the jump. I mean, their first witness was, Officer Flores to authenticate that video, right? And to establish the bribery. So we know the video is everything, and video is everything in any case because people can lie, but video doesn't lie. And that's how powerful that 2016 video. Frankly, I expected, and I still expect there to be a lot more video because Combs reportedly would videotape these freak-offs. I know there was some discussion by the media about seeing those freak-offs, but other non-freak-off related video, because there was a treasure trove of evidence that was retrieved when HSI agents raided Diddy's Los Angeles and Miami homes.
I think that's coming up next. I think it's coming up this afternoon where she's going to be shown the videos. The jury's going to be shown the videos. She has to describe what's happening. Combs allegedly directing her. That's the key. That's the line there. Directing, coercion, control. That's how you get to sex trafficking. Okay, we have an update from court. Prosecutor asks Ventura, how often were you in contact with Sean's staff? Ventura responds, daily. Who are in these photos? Ventura's asked. She replies, Christina Coram and Miss Fletcher. What did you call Miss Coram? KK. And who's this? D-Rock. He was Sean's security. Let me ask you a question here, Nima. If you're the prosecutor and you're bringing up these specific names, are they definitely being called as witnesses?
I think Christina Coram, absolutely. That's Diddy's right-hand woman. I mean, she knows where the bodies are buried. She reportedly would procure the sex workers, would have a fanny pack with the drugs. I'm surprised. I would be very surprised if she hasn't flipped and she's not cooperating, because under the RICO statute, even if she didn't participate in the freak-offs, if she set them up, she's on the hook substantively for that sex trafficking. So she has significant exposure. She's at the top of the food chain when it comes to Diddy's entourage and his organization. So she would be one of the government star witness, of course, aside from the victims themselves.
Rich, throw it over to you. Got a question from Millie Iwano. What reason would the defense call Alex Fine, Cassie's husband, up as a witness?
Well, we were talking about this earlier. I don't know unless he's going to verify that she told him certain things, although I'm not even sure that would be admissible. Or maybe that he witnessed violence. I don't know, because I don't know how long he's been in the picture.
Again, I go to the idea maybe questioned about the lawsuit and her intentions
Hey,
and motivation.
I wanted to say one thing about something Nima said that I thought
Sure.
was, I always like what Nima said, but the point about needing more violence, if you're the prosecution, I totally agree with that, right? One of the things about this tape of the encounter in the hotel is if it's a one-off, the jury will treat it entirely differently.
Sure.
It's just no one should be judged on the basis of their worst night. And he went wild for some reason. But if it's connected by other acts, whether supported by video or not, just credible testimony, that this kind of violence was a persistent and regular thing in the relationship, that's going to be a much different story.
And it might not all be documented on surveillance tape, but if you had Mr. Phillip yesterday say, I saw abuse myself, that's corroboration. Obviously, eyewitness testimony, very different than surveillance tapes, but who knows what else the prosecution has. Let me ask you this, Nima. We got a question from Penny Miller. Do we know the list of people he called and attempted to prevent them from testifying? I know he's accused of obstruction and bribery, and I do wonder if whether or not his alleged actions behind bars won't become a factor in this case, but I don't think so, right?
I don't think so. I mean, obviously, the government superseded multiple times. They could have added those obstruction charges. I know it was a big issue at the bail hearing. I mean, ultimately, obstruction could be a RICO predicate act, but it's not something that the Department of Justice outlined in their opening statement. Possible it comes in, but I don't think so at this point.
Okay, this is an interesting line of testimony just coming in now from court. Prosecutor asks Cassandra Ventura, how frequently were you in Sean's residences? She replies, all the time. Did they all have safes? To which she responds, yes. What did you observe in them? What did you observe in these safes? Ventura responds, cash, jewelry, cameras and videotapes, guns in New York, LA, and Miami, and Alpine, New Jersey. That feels particularly relevant, Nima. Talk to us about why.
Of course, the guns, obviously, and we know that guns were seized when his homes were raided, and the cameras, right? If it was something that was in the ordinary course, why would you lock up your camera in the safe and the video in the safe? That must have been something potentially unlawful, something that you could use to blackmail, otherwise something valuable. You put valuables in the safe like jewelry, right? So Combs at least thought that video would be helpful, and we're waiting to see still if Cassie Ventura is going to identify other people who participated in the freak-offs aside from Phillip from yesterday.
One more question for you, Nima. I mean, I have more questions for you, but I got another question for you right now. This is from CMF 702. Does Cassie's reluctance to report to the police hurt her credibility?
It's something that does, whenever you don't have those contemporaneous reports, that's something that the defense is going to hang its hat on, right? The fact that she filed a civil lawsuit, that she's making these allegations years later. We know that the government is going to bring in a witness to explain all this, the psychology of abuse, physical, sexual abuse, by people who are in love with their abusers. They don't report it right away. And this is something that they fronted yesterday with Flores, right? They asked, well, why didn't you call the police? And Flores said, well, the victim, there really was no victim. She didn't want to report this. She just wanted to leave. So they're going to have an explanation for this. And this is consistent with a lot of domestic violence and sexual assault cases where the victim doesn't report it right away.
Nima, I lied to you. I have another question for you. Just came in. This is from Alpha and Omega Forever. If witness 3, so alleged victim number 3, doesn't show up, what's going to happen?
Big problem. And, this is something I've been talking about from the beginning. What you want to do in these types of cases, and it doesn't matter if you have a Weinstein or a Cosby or a Diddy, you really want to overwhelm the defense with the sheer number of victims, because jurors may have a tough time believing 1 or 2 victims, but if victim after victim is telling the same story of physical and sexual violence, it's very difficult to overcome. Now, obviously, here, you're not going to call the 100 people who have raised civil claims. But maybe if you're the government, you don't want to hang your hat on just 3, because obviously Cassie is an ex. So the argument there is that maybe she's a disgruntled ex-girlfriend that has an axe to grind. You have one other victim. And then, and especially in a case like this where you have a defendant that has almost unlimited money, there's always the potential that someone gets paid off. I'm not saying that, he's going to do something illegal, but you have to, at least accept that possibility if you're the government, or that he may intimidate one of the victims not to show. If it were me, I would like to have at least 5, 6 victims in a case like this that I know are locked and loaded that may not go sideways.
See, I think she is so important because she is the connective tissue for each charge. So not just racketeering, not just staff, not just team members, but predicate crimes, kidnapping, right? Well, maybe kidnapping. We'll get to that. But, drug trafficking. We know that there's an allegation. Obviously, there's sex trafficking. But this is what's so interesting. The reason I bring it up is because her testimony so far mirrors what her allegations were in her civil complaint. Why do I say that? She just testified, and I'll throw this to you, Rich. Do you recall an incident between Sean and Suge Knight? Now, again, this is from her complaint. Yes, we were having a freak off in LA. D-Rock came in and said Suge was down at a diner. Sean drove over there. What was your reaction? The prosecutor asks. I cried, said, don't do something stupid. And this is the allegation that he took a weapon and, was going after Suge Knight, who is his rival. They are basing all of this on her complaint. And again, goes to the idea of why none of these criminal charges would have advanced, I think, without her filing her lawsuit. What do you take away from what they're doing here?
Well, okay. So I agree. It demonstrates again that the filing of that civil complaint at the end of 2023 is really the seminal act that gets you to this trial today of a criminal matter. It also goes to what I was saying before, that they're using this witness broadly. She's not just testifying about what happened to her. She's testifying about the safe. She's testifying about the guns. She's testifying about video and money. And now she's testifying about Suge Knight and other alleged criminal activity. So they're putting as much on the table through her as they can, which I guess makes sense.
And Nima, I'll throw to you. We have another update from court. Prosecutor asks, were you ever handed a gun? Again, an allegation verbatim from her complaint. Yes, we were going to a club in downtown LA. We'd taken mushrooms. I was high. I was told to put the gun in my bag. I was freaking out. Who was present? A driver, security, and Sean. Becomes a question if they're going to testify. What do you think about that?
Also important, right? Guns, violence, security, all that goes to that force, that goes to that coercion, right? It's really the totality of the circumstances. Obviously, if you're the prosecution, you want definitive statements like, have sex with this individual, or I will kill you, I will harm you. But, you don't necessarily need that to prove coercion. Would a reasonable person think they can't say no? And, if there's that age difference, there's that power disparity, right? And someone has a significant cache of firearms and they're giving you one of them, potentially loaded, that's a big deal.
Well, listen, it is a big deal. There's a lot more we could break down. We have been live straight for 2 hours breaking down Cassandra Ventura's testimony. I don't have a voice anymore. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to thank Nima. I'm going to thank Rich, my excellent guest, for breaking down all of my questions, all of your questions. You two were terrific. Thank you both so much for taking the time, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jesse.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Rich.
And I want to thank all of our viewers as well for listening to this and for following us. And I also real quickly want to thank our incredible sponsor who helps support us and helps us to put on these shows. That is Morgan & Morgan. This is America's largest injury law firm. And if I can quickly just tell you about them, this is a major firm. Okay, this is a firm that secured a $6 million verdict for a car crash victim in Florida, $13 million for a wrongful auto death in Georgia, another
All right, there you have it. We got a little bit of information from Cassie. We find out that she's testifying and they're asking her things about stuff that has Suge Knight's name in it. What happened in California at the clubs? Her packing a GUN for him. Oh, so I guess they're doing all this to try to prove that I don't know. They're stringing us along. So the kind of man that he is. So we're getting the facts from the case. They're tweeting it out. So this is day 2. This is long and exhausting. So let me know what you guys think about it. And I'm going to get back and I got some things to do this afternoon. Let me at least come on camera. Got some things to do this afternoon. So I'll talk to you guys later. Y'all have a great afternoon. Bye.